The streets of Culiacán are drowning in blood tonight, and the message echoing through every alleyway tells a story that will reshape the entire drug trafficking landscape forever. When the sons of the world's most notorious drug lord decide to break the ultimate code of silence, the consequences don't just ripple through criminal organizations. They create tsunamis that destroy everything in their path. Picture this. You're sitting in a federal courtroom in Chicago, watching as one of the most powerful criminal heirs in history stands before a judge and admits to orchestrating $1 billion drug empire. The confession itself isn't shocking anymore. What's shocking is what happened next. Within days of that guilty plea, 17 family members quietly crossed into the United States. No arrests, no warrants, no explanations. Just a mass migration that smells suspiciously like the early stages of witness protection. But that's just the appetizer to this feast of betrayal. The main course involves a betrayal so calculated, so ruthlessly executed, that even hardened cartel veterans are struggling to process what they've witnessed. We're talking about the systematic dismantling of one of the most powerful criminal organizations in the Western Hemisphere, carried out not by law enforcement agencies or rival cartels, but by the very blood relatives who were supposed to inherit the throne. This isn't your typical cartel power struggle where bullets fly and territories get carved up through violence. This is something entirely different. This is a chess game played with human lives, federal plea agreements, and backroom deals that stretch from the mountains of Sinaloa to the corridors of power in Washington. And the players aren't just drug traffickers and federal prosecutors. They're intelligence agencies, corrupt officials, and criminal organizations that have spent decades building networks worth billions of dollars. The betrayal began with a phone call that changed everything. Imagine being invited to what you think is a peace meeting by someone you've known since they were crawling around in diapers. You arrive expecting negotiations, maybe some territorial agreements, perhaps even a family reunion of sorts. Instead, you find yourself zip-tied in the back of a truck, flying across international borders and delivered like a package to federal agents who've been hunting you for 4 decades. That's exactly what happened to one of Mexico's most elusive criminal masterminds, a man who had evaded capture longer than Pablo Escobar lived, longer than most cartels even existed. He was the ghost of the drug trafficking world, the untouchable legend who built empires while governments rose and fell around him. And he was betrayed by the sons of his closest friend and business partner. The timing of this betrayal wasn't accidental. It happened precisely when those sons needed it most, right as their own legal troubles were mounting and federal prosecutors were closing in. The message they sent wasn't subtle. They essentially announced to the world that loyalty means nothing when survival is on the line, that family bonds dissolve when prison sentences stretch into decades, and that the old rules of the criminal underworld died the moment they decided cooperation was more profitable than resistance. But here's where this story gets truly disturbing. The betrayal wasn't the end of their strategy. It was just the opening move in a much larger game. While their former ally was being processed through the American justice system, the sons were busy forging new alliances that would have seemed impossible just months earlier. They reached out to their most dangerous rivals, organizations known for decapitations, terror tactics, and territorial expansion that makes military invasions look restrained. The alliance they formed wasn't built on friendship or mutual respect. It was constructed on a foundation of shared enemies and calculated revenge. Together, these criminal organizations began systematically eliminating anyone who might have remained loyal to their betrayed former partner. We're not talking about targeted assassinations or strategic removals. We're talking about a wholesale purge that has turned entire cities into war zones. The evidence of this purge is everywhere, if you know where to look. Bodies of chemists and mid-level traffickers started appearing in fields outside major population centers. These weren't random killings or dical executions designed crimes of passion. They were method to send a very specific message to anyone who might be thinking about revenge or resistance. The message was simple and terrifying. The old organization is dead, the new alliance is in control, and opposition will be met with swift and brutal consequences. What makes this situation even more chilling is the surgical precision with which these eliminations are being carried out. The people being targeted aren't random victims or innocent bystanders. They're specifically chosen individuals who possess knowledge, connections, or capabilities that the new alliance considers threatening. Fentanyl production experts, money laundering specialists, transportation coordinators, and communication networks are all being systematically dismantled. The financial implications of this purge are staggering. When you eliminate the people who know how to move money across international borders, how to manufacture synthetic drugs at industrial scale, and how to coordinate shipments worth hundreds of millions of dollars, you're not just removing competitors, you're destroying decades of accumulated expertise and infrastructure that took enormous investments of time and resources to develop. But the most disturbing aspect of this entire situation isn't the violence or the betrayal, or even the strategic alliances being formed. It's the silence from government officials, who should be responding to what amounts to a complete reorganization of criminal power structures. The lack of official response suggests either complete incompetence or something much more troubling. It suggests coordination. Think about the logistics involved in delivering a high-value target across international borders directly to federal agents. Think about the timing of family members crossing into the United States just before major legal proceedings. Think about the sudden decrease in drug seizures at border crossings right after these arrests and plea agreements. None of this happens without extensive planning, coordination, and cooperation between multiple agencies and organizations. The pattern that emerges when you connect these dots is deeply unsettling. It suggests that what we're witnessing isn't just criminal organizations adapting to law enforcement pressure. It's the emergence of a new model of cooperation between criminal enterprises and government agencies, where traditional adversarial relationships are replaced by transactional arrangements that benefit both sides. The sons didn't just betray their father's closest ally, they betrayed the entire traditional structure of organized crime, where loyalty was valued above survival, and cooperation with authorities was considered the ultimate transgression. They've created a new paradigm where criminal organizations can essentially negotiate their way out of consequences by offering up bigger targets and more valuable intelligence. This shift has implications that extend far beyond the drug trafficking world. It establishes precedents for how criminal organizations interact with government agencies, how international law enforcement operations are conducted, and how justice is administered when the stakes involve billions of dollars and global supply chains. The message these sons have sent to other criminal organizations around the world is both an invitation and a warning. The invitation is simple. Cooperation is more profitable than resistance, and the American justice system is willing to make deals with anyone who can deliver valuable targets. The warning is equally clear. Traditional concepts of loyalty and criminal honor are obsolete, and anyone who clings to old ways of thinking will be eliminated by those smart enough to embrace the new reality. The ripple effects of this betrayal are now spreading across Mexico like a virus that infects everything it touches. Cities that once operated under an uneasy but predictable peace are now battlegrounds where ordinary people huddle in their homes while heavily armed convoys patrol the streets like occupying armies. Restaurants close before sunset. Schools send children home early. The entire social fabric of communities is being torn apart by a war that most residents never chose to participate in. What makes this violence particularly devastating is its unpredictability. Under the old system, there were rules, territories, and hierarchies that everyone understood. Civilians knew which neighborhoods to avoid, which businesses were off limits, and how to navigate daily life without accidentally stumbling into cartel business. That predictable structure has been completely shattered by the new alliance and their systematic elimination campaign. The human cost of this transformation is measured not just in body counts, but in the complete breakdown of normal life across entire regions. Families are leaving their homes with nothing more than the clothes on their backs. Business owners are abandoning shops they've operated for decades. Children are developing trauma responses to sounds that most kids their age associate with video games or action movies. But perhaps the most disturbing development is how this violence is being weaponized as a form of communication. Each execution, each dumped body, each burned vehicle is carefully chosen to send specific messages to specific audiences. The location where bodies are found, the condition they're discovered in, and the timing of these discoveries are all calculated to maximize psychological impact on remaining opposition members. This psychological warfare extends beyond just eliminating enemies. It's designed to create such overwhelming fear that potential rivals will choose submission over resistance. The message being broadcast through these acts of violence is that opposition to the new alliance doesn't just mean death of death that serves. It means the kin as a permanent warning to anyone else who might consider challenging their authority. The financial architecture supporting this campaign of violence and intimidation is equally sophisticated. Money laundering operations that once moved hundreds of millions of dollars through legitimate businesses are being repurposed to fund military-style operations. Shell companies established to hide drug profits are now purchasing weapons, vehicles, and equipment that rival what many national armies possess. Intelligence gathering capabilities that were developed to track rival cartels and law enforcement activities have been turned toward identifying and locating anyone associated with the betrayed organization. Communication networks that once coordinated drug shipments are now being used to coordinate elimination campaigns across multiple states and potentially multiple countries. The technological sophistication of these operations would be impressive if it weren't being used for such destructive purposes. Encrypted communication systems, surveillance equipment, and logistical coordination platforms are being deployed with the kind of precision and effectiveness that professional military organizations struggle to achieve. What's particularly chilling about this technological capability is how it's being used to create detailed profiles of targets before they're eliminated. These aren't crimes of passion or spontaneous acts of violence. They're carefully planned operations that involve extensive surveillance, intelligence gathering, and strategic timing to maximize impact while minimizing risk to the perpetrators. The international implications of this reorganization are just beginning to become apparent. Drug trafficking routes that took decades to establish are being restructured. Supply chains that connected South American producers with North American consumers are being rebuilt from the ground up. Distribution networks that operated in dozens of countries are being consolidated under new management structures. This reorganization isn't happening in isolation. It's affecting criminal organizations throughout Latin America, criminal networks in the United States, and even international money laundering operations that extend into Europe and Asia. The ripple effects are being felt by organizations that may not have had any direct involvement in the original betrayal, but are now being forced to adapt to a completely changed landscape. The speed with which this transformation is occurring is unprecedented in the history of organized crime. Major criminal empires typically take years or even decades to rise or fall. The changes we're witnessing are happening in months or even weeks. Traditional power structures that seemed permanent and unchangeable are being dismantled and rebuilt in real time. Government responses to these changes have been inadequate, confused, and often counterproductive. Law enforcement agencies that spent decades building intelligence networks and operational capabilities are discovering that their information and strategies are obsolete. The criminal organizations they thought they understood have been replaced by entirely new entities with different leadership structures, operational methods, and strategic objectives. Political leaders are struggling to develop appropriate responses to a situation that doesn't fit any of their existing frameworks for dealing with organized crime. Traditional law enforcement approaches assume that criminal organizations operate according to predictable patterns and hierarchies. Those assumptions are proving to be dangerously incorrect in the current environment. The economic impact of this transformation extends far beyond the drug trafficking industry. Legitimate businesses that operated in regions controlled by the old organization are discovering that their previous arrangements and protections are no longer valid. New management means new rules, new payments, and new risks that many business owners are simply not prepared to handle. Tourism industries in affected regions are collapsing as visitors cancel trips and avoid areas that were previously considered safe. Agricultural producers are struggling to transport crops through territories where armed conflicts can erupt without warning. Manufacturing facilities are relocating operations to avoid getting caught in the crossfire of ongoing territorial disputes. The banking and financial services sectors are also being affected as money laundering patterns change and new compliance challenges emerge. Financial institutions that developed sophisticated systems for detecting and reporting suspicious activities based on historical patterns are discovering that those patterns no longer apply to current criminal operations. International trade relationships are being disrupted as supply chains that depend on stability and predictability in certain regions are forced to find alternative routes and partners. The economic costs of this instability are being measured not just in millions, but in billions of dollars of lost productivity and increased security expenditures. Perhaps most concerning is how this transformation is creating opportunities for other criminal organizations to expand their operations into territories and markets that were previously controlled by more established groups. The chaos and violence that accompanies major reorganizations of criminal power structures often creates power vacuums that can be exploited by smaller, more aggressive organizations looking to establish themselves. The long-term implications of these changes are still unfolding, but early indicators suggest that we may be witnessing the emergence of criminal organizations that are more violent, more technologically sophisticated, and more internationally connected than anything we've seen before. The old guardrails that limited criminal behavior are being systematically destroyed and replaced with new models that prioritize efficiency and profit over traditional concepts of honor and loyalty. The transformation we're witnessing goes deeper than simple criminal reorganization. What's emerging from the ashes of this betrayal is something that law enforcement agencies never prepared for, something that government officials refuse to acknowledge publicly, and something that threatens to fundamentally alter the balance of power between criminal organizations and the state itself. The new alliance between former enemies has created what intelligence analysts are quietly calling a super cartel, an organization with capabilities that dwarf anything previously seen in the Western Hemisphere. This isn't just about combining resources or sharing territory. This is about creating an integrated criminal enterprise that operates with the sophistication of a multinational corporation and the ruthlessness of a military insurgency. The operational structure of this new entity defies traditional understanding of how criminal organizations function. Instead of hierarchical command structures where orders flow down from leadership to street-level operatives, we're seeing network-based operations where multiple autonomous cells coordinate activities across vast geographic areas. This decentralized approach makes the organization incredibly difficult to infiltrate, disrupt, or destroy through conventional law enforcement methods. Intelligence gathering capabilities within this new alliance have reached levels that rival those of national security agencies. They're not just tracking rival organizations and law enforcement activities anymore. They're conducting comprehensive surveillance of political figures, business leaders, journalists, and anyone else who might pose a threat to their operations. The scope and sophistication of their intelligence networks suggest access to resources and expertise that goes far beyond what traditional criminal organizations typically possess. Communication security within the alliance has also evolved dramatically. They're using military-grade encryption, secure satellite communication systems, and digital currencies that make their financial transactions nearly impossible to trace. The technological infrastructure supporting their operations would be impressive for any organization, legitimate or otherwise. For a criminal enterprise, it's unprecedented. The financial implications of this technological sophistication are staggering. Conservative estimates suggest that the combined operations of the new alliance generate revenues exceeding the gross domestic product of many small nations. But unlike traditional businesses, none of this revenue is subject to taxation, regulation, or oversight. It's pure profit that can be reinvested in expanding operations, acquiring more sophisticated technology, and corrupting officials at every level of government. Money laundering operations have become so sophisticated that legitimate financial institutions are struggling to detect suspicious transactions. The alliance has developed techniques for moving money that exploit weaknesses in international banking systems, regulatory frameworks, and compliance procedures. They're not just hiding money anymore. They're integrating criminal profits into the legitimate economy so seamlessly that the illegal revenue distinction between legal streams is becoming meaningless. The corruption implications of this financial power are deeply troubling. When criminal organizations possess resources that exceed those of many government agencies, they can effectively purchase immunity from prosecution, protection from rivals, and cooperation from officials who should be working to stop them. We're not talking about small-scale bribery or isolated incidents of corruption. We're talking about systematic infiltration of government institutions at every level. Border security agencies, customs officials, local police departments, prosecutors' offices, and even federal law enforcement agencies are all potential targets for corruption. The alliance has the resources to identify vulnerable officials, research their personal and financial situations, and make offers that are difficult to refuse. The combination of generous bribes and credible threats creates an environment where cooperation with criminal organizations becomes the rational choice for many officials. The judicial system is particularly vulnerable to this kind of corruption. Judges, prosecutors, and court administrators who handle cases involving organized crime are under constant pressure from organizations that have unlimited resources and no moral constraints. The alliance can offer financial incentives that exceed what these officials will earn in their entire careers, while simultaneously threatening consequences that extend to family members and loved ones. Legislative bodies are also being targeted through sophisticated lobbying efforts that disguise criminal interests as legitimate business concerns. The alliance has developed techniques for influencing policy decisions that affect their operations without revealing their involvement in the process. They're funding political campaigns, sponsoring research studies, and supporting advocacy groups that promote policies favorable to their interests. The media landscape is being manipulated through a combination of financial incentives and intimidation tactics that discourage investigative reporting on alliance activities. Journalists who attempt to expose criminal operations face threats that extend beyond their professional careers to their personal safety and the safety of their families. News organizations are discovering that covering certain topics results in advertising boycotts, legal challenges, and other forms of economic pressure that make objective reporting financially unsustainable. Educational institutions are being targeted through funding arrangements that create dependencies on criminal money while influencing academic research and curriculum development. Universities and research centers that study organized crime, law enforcement, or related topics are finding that their funding sources have connections to the very organizations they're supposed to be studying objectively. The Alliance has also recognized the importance of public relations and image management in ways that previous criminal organizations never did. They're funding community development projects, charitable organizations, and social programs that create positive associations with their activities in the minds of local populations. This isn't just about buying loyalty. It's about creating genuine support among people who benefit from criminal largesse. Healthcare facilities, educational programs, infrastructure improvements, and economic development initiatives funded by criminal organizations create complex moral dilemmas for communities that desperately need these services but understand their problematic origins. The Alliance is essentially forcing communities to choose between accepting help from criminals or continuing to suffer from government neglect. Religious institutions are also being targeted through donations and funding arrangements that create moral compromises for religious leaders who want to serve their communities but understand the ethical implications of accepting criminal money. Churches, mosques, synagogues, and other religious organizations are being placed in impossible positions, where refusing criminal funding means denying services to people who desperately need them. The social fabric of entire regions is being rewoven around criminal patronage systems that replace government services with privately funded alternatives that serve criminal interests. This isn't just corruption in the traditional sense, it's the systematic replacement of legitimate governance structures with criminal alternatives that provide better services, more reliable protection, and greater economic opportunities than government institutions. Young people growing up in these environments are being presented with career choices that make criminal organizations appear more attractive than legitimate alternatives. When criminal enterprises offer better pay, more advancement opportunities, and greater job security than legitimate businesses, rational economic calculations favor criminal careers over legal ones. Educational systems in affected regions are producing graduates who are perfectly suited for criminal careers but poorly prepared for legitimate employment. This isn't accidental. It's the result of systematic investments in educational programs that develop skills needed by criminal organizations while neglecting areas that might create alternatives to criminal employment. The Alliance has also developed sophisticated recruitment techniques that identify and cultivate talent from legitimate professions. They're recruiting accountants from major firms, engineers from technology companies, lawyers from prestigious practices, and other professionals who bring expertise that enhances criminal operations. These aren't forced recruitments. They're voluntary career changes that offer better compensation and advancement opportunities than legitimate employment. The brain drain from legitimate institutions to criminal organizations is creating expertise gaps in government agencies and legitimate businesses while simultaneously enhancing criminal capabilities. Law enforcement agencies are losing their most talented investigators to criminal organizations that offer better pay and working conditions. Financial institutions are losing compliance experts to criminal enterprises that need their skills for money laundering operations. This systematic recruitment of professional talent is transforming criminal organizations from crude criminal enterprises into sophisticated business operations that can compete effectively with legitimate corporations in any area they choose to enter. The distinction between criminal and legitimate business practices is becoming increasingly meaningless as criminal organizations adopt professional standards that exceed those of many legitimate businesses. The Alliance has also developed capabilities for influencing international policy through diplomatic channels, international business relationships, and multilateral organizations. They're not just operating within national boundaries anymore. They're functioning as quasi-state actors that engage in diplomacy, international trade, and cross-border cooperation agreements that rival those of legitimate governments. International business relationships established by the Alliance are creating economic dependencies that make government action against criminal operations economically costly for multiple countries. When criminal organizations become major trading partners, employers, and sources of foreign investment, Government officials must weigh the economic costs of law enforcement actions against criminal enterprises that contribute significantly to national economic performance. The global supply chains controlled by the alliance are becoming so integrated into legitimate international commerce that disrupting criminal operations would cause significant economic disruptions in multiple countries. This economic leverage gives criminal organizations influence over government policy decisions that extends far beyond traditional corruption or intimidation. Currency manipulation, commodity trading, and international investment activities conducted by the alliance are affecting global financial markets in ways that give them influence over economic conditions in multiple countries. They're not just participants in global markets anymore. They're market makers who can influence prices, currency values, and investment flows on a scale that rivals nation-states. The technological capabilities being developed by the alliance are also creating new forms of criminal activity that existing legal frameworks are not equipped to handle. Cyber warfare capabilities, artificial intelligence applications, and biotechnology developments within criminal organizations are advancing faster than government regulatory responses. Criminal organizations are essentially creating new categories of criminal activity that don't fit existing legal definitions or enforcement capabilities. The pace of technological innovation within criminal organizations is accelerating due to their ability to attract top talent from legitimate technology companies and their freedom from regulatory constraints that limit legitimate research and development activities. Criminal organizations can develop and deploy new technologies without concern for safety testing, environmental impact assessments, or ethical review processes that slow legitimate innovation. Research and development investments by criminal organizations are creating technological advantages that legitimate businesses and government agencies struggle to match. When criminal enterprises can invest unlimited resources in developing new capabilities without regulatory oversight, they can achieve technological superiority in areas that matter to their operations. The implications of this technological superiority extend beyond criminal activities to national security concerns. When criminal organizations possess capabilities that exceed those of law enforcement agencies or even military forces, the traditional balance of power between criminals and the state is fundamentally altered. The technological arms race between criminal organizations and government agencies has reached a tipping point where traditional law enforcement methods are becoming obsolete. Intelligence agencies that once held decisive advantages in surveillance, communication interception, and data analysis are discovering that criminal enterprises now possess equivalent or superior capabilities in these critical areas. Facial recognition systems, biometric databases, and predictive analytics tools that were once exclusive to government agencies are now being deployed by criminal organizations to identify threats, track rivals, and anticipate law enforcement operations. The alliance has essentially created its own intelligence apparatus that operates with the efficiency of national security agencies, but without legal constraints or oversight mechanisms. Drone technology has become a particularly concerning development within criminal operations. These aren't simple surveillance drones or basic delivery systems. We're talking about military-grade unmanned aircraft equipped with advanced sensors, encrypted communication systems, and payload capabilities that can be used for reconnaissance, communication relay, or direct action operations across vast geographic areas. The sophistication of these drone operations suggests access to technology and expertise that goes far beyond what street-level criminals should theoretically possess. Flight patterns, operational coordination, and technical capabilities indicate involvement of personnel with military or aerospace backgrounds who have brought their professional expertise into criminal enterprises. Satellite communication systems deployed by the alliance provide global connectivity that bypasses traditional communication infrastructure entirely. These systems allow coordination of operations across continents without relying on commercial telecommunications networks that can be monitored or disrupted by law enforcement agencies. The investment required for this level of communication infrastructure represents hundreds of millions of dollars in equipment and operational costs. Cybersecurity capabilities within criminal organizations have reached levels that pose serious threats to critical infrastructure, financial systems, and government networks. The alliance isn't just protecting its own digital assets anymore. It's developing offensive cyber capabilities that can disrupt rival operations, compromise law enforcement systems, and manipulate financial markets for profit. Data mining and analysis capabilities allow criminal organizations to process vast amounts of information from social media, financial transactions, government databases, and commercial records to identify opportunities, assess risks, and plan operations with unprecedented precision. The analytical capabilities being deployed exceed those available to most legitimate businesses and many government agencies. What we've witnessed isn't just the collapse of a criminal dynasty, it's the birth of a new era where loyalty is currency and betrayal is strategy. The sons of El Chapo didn't just send a message to rival cartels. They rewrote the entire playbook for organized crime, proving that in the modern underworld, survival trumps honor every single time. The question isn't who will be next to fall, but who will be smart enough to adapt to this brutal new reality.